Are you looking to stay active and healthy in the comfort of your own home? CNET has a variety of exercise programs designed to help you stay fit and increase strength and flexibility. Strength training, moving freely, and zesty chair exercises all work on improving flexibility, ease of movement, and core body strength. Gentle Yoga is a specifically designed yoga program that is easy on the joints and easy for beginners. Chair Yoga has been created for those with limited mobility. CNET's exercise programs air several times each week on Channel 98 CETV. For specific airing times, please visit cnet1.org and click on CNET Schedules, or call CNET at 814-238-5031. Nothing good on TV? You're just not watching the right channels.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
Sponsorship for this program is brought to you in part by Town and Gown Magazine. If it's happening in Happy Valley, it's in Town and Gown Magazine.
My name is Elizabeth Siegelman, and I'm the director of the Center for Alternatives and Community Justice. The primary goals of the Community Conversation series are to open up a dialogue between the borough and the local community about topics relevant to the Center County community, and to provide a venue to learn from and engage with our fellow citizens on a variety of important topics. Tonight's conversation is prescient to our community and to our school district and surrounding school districts, which have suffered a number of youth suicides in recent years. Youth suicide and suicide in general is a tough topic to discuss and is often tinged with guilt and shame, but we strongly believe that the way to avoid future deaths is to open up a dialogue about this topic in order to educate the public about existing services and to work together to fill in the gaps. One of the most accessible resources that we would like to mention is the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Just dial or text 988 and you will be connected to a Crisis Lifeline worker. In addition to 988, the panel will discuss a number of other resources this evening, and they've brought print materials that you can access out in the lobby at the front table. Thank you all for being here tonight and for engaging in this difficult but important conversation.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome again. My name is Chaluvia Zulu, and I am the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Director for the Borough of State College. The Community Conversation Series is part of the borough's DEIB programming, which specifically addresses disparities in society. In times like this, being in community to have these conversations isn't just about connection. It is an active form of resistance. As those in positions of power are trying to silence conversations about equity and belonging, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight, because as we may be facing a lot of scrutiny, every time we gather, share stories, and push for change, we make it clear that we are still here and we are not backing down. Tonight, we will focus on the topic of youth mental health in our community. Our panel of experts will share their knowledge and lived experience with us tonight in the hopes that the audience will gain bear with me, broader understanding of existing youth mental health services in State College and how they can be accessed. After the panel discussion, please join us upstairs for an informal circle discussion with the panelists. Before we begin, let me introduce our panelists. We have Stephanie Beaver. Maybe not. Okay. We're going in alphabetical order. Okay. We have Stephanie Beaver. Stephanie Beaver is the Director of Student Services for the State College Area School District. We have Jen Chessie. Jen is a program specialist with Center County Mental Health. Sue Marshall. Sue is an independent college advising and admissions counselor and the owner of College Gateways LLC. Prior to establishing her own business, she served as a high school counselor and later as head counselor in the State High Counseling Department. We have Dr. Peter Montemini. Dr. Montemini is a licensed clinical psychologist and certified mindfulness instructor who works with children and adolescents. We have Representative Paul Takak. Representative Takak was elected to the PA House of Representatives in 2022 to represent the 82nd Legislative District in the heart of Center County. We have Marissa Vasari. Marissa is the founder and president of the Jana Marie Foundation. Marissa founded this organization after losing her sister, Jana Vasari, to suicide in 2011. And we have Teresa Wells. Dr. Wells is a licensed psychologist who is the director of the psychological clinic at Penn State. Dr. Wells is also an associate clinical professor of the clinical psychology PhD program at Penn State. All right.
Okay. Thank you to the panelists for being here. Let's begin with our first question, and whoever would like to begin can answer first. What mental health programs and resources are currently available for youth in SCASD, Penn State, and the broader Center County community? How accessible are these services, and what gaps need to be addressed?
I can speak to some. So I'm Marissa from Jana Marie Foundation. We started in 2012 and have been able to offer a lot of programs in partnership with State College Area School District and other community organizations. So inside of the school, and I'm speaking specifically to State College School District, but this is in all of the districts around the county, we provide QPR suicide prevention or question, persuade, refer to the educators and staff of State College Area School District, as well as 8th grade students and 11th, 12th grade students in their health classes. We also provide teen mental health first aid. This is for students in 9th grade that are taking the health class as well. And if they decided to take health in the summer, they are able to work with their counselors to be able to come into one of the sessions or to find a time that works for them to come to that program. That's 4.5 hours of education around mental health, including how we can support our peers and how we can remain a friend to them and get them connected to those professionals that are really able to help with getting them connected to the appropriate resources. In addition, we offer small groups at State College Area School District in many of their different schools. And so those are going to be oftentimes individuals who are referred to coming to a smaller group. It is not counseling, but it's working on some life skills, whether that be friendship skills or resiliency, stress management, those types of things. And so we offer, I think we have 11 groups right now that are being offered at the schools in partnership with State College Area School District. There's also the mental health summits that our kids can get in. That's at the high school level, and I'm sure Stephanie's going to talk more about those. And it's also being used in the middle schools and throughout the district as well. Outside of the school hours, Jana Marie Foundation offers no-cost youth programs. So we hold those in our new office space in State College. We're on Rolling Ridge Drive, and we have different levels. So we have an elementary school group, we have middle school groups and high school groups that are available. And then all summer long, we offer no-cost summer camps that are designed to teach about resiliency and peer connections. And then we also do a lot of evidence-based education for parents and caregivers. So it takes an entire community. We talked a little bit about the educators when it came to some of the programs like QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer. We also offer CALM trainings or counseling on access to lethal means, the youth mental health first aid training, so adults assisting young people. And we do all of that with educators, but we also need to do it with community members as well. Our parents, our caregivers, our youth-serving organizations, because it takes an entire community to really create those bigger safety nets. So we spend a lot of time doing evidence-based educational programs across the lifespan, just to make sure people in our community know how to have these courageous conversations. Okay.
Is this on? Yes. Oh, good. Thanks for kicking us off and breaking the ice there. So Stephanie Beaver, Director of Student Services, and I could talk about the programs within our State College Area School District. So really, we look at our tiered framework, and so our school counselors are the primary first stop for connecting students to supports and like looking at those needs. We have social emotional learning curriculum that happens in kindergarten through 8th grade. We have Second Step and Character Strong. We also offer social emotional learning tiered supports within those programs. So Character Strong has tier 2. Part of not only our school counselors, we also connect with, we have social workers that work with our students, we have a food bank pantry, we have a needs assessment, we have mental health clinicians on staff, a resiliency coach in our schools. So we are looking at our professionals and really thinking through what are the supports that are needed for our students. One of the things that we have in our school to look at student mental health and wellness is our universal screener. Our universal screener happens twice a year. Within that universal screener, we're looking for risk and flags within our student population, and our school counselors are integral in looking at that data with their administrators, with their school-based teams, and really connecting with parents to say, hey, you know, let's have a conversation. What other supports are needed? In addition to those universal screeners, we have partnerships, fantastic partnerships. Jana Marie, Penn State, Dr. Montminy, Jen. We have lots of partnerships. We have, unique to State College, is we have a internal school-based mental health team. And so within that school-based mental health team is that we are trying to break down barriers and access to care. And so some students who might not have insurance or might not have resources to connect to outside counselors, we want to make sure that they are connected and their mental health needs are met. And so within our school-based team is that we take referrals, we talk about supports, we consult with our school-based groups to say, hey, we understand you're struggling. What are things that we can put into place to help that student in school? So our school-based mental health teams, meets weekly, we review cases, we help students connect to care, connect to services, and those partnerships are really, they make a true impact on what our students are doing within that school-based mental health team. In addition to that, we do lots of education and resources out. We do the mindfulness connections and providing resources. We partner with Jana Marie to provide some real community conversations for people who care. So there's lots of different things that we're working on. The Mental Health Summit that has been in the high school, we're working on to expand that because we think that it's a focus for student wellness and like for them to be connected to like what are the supports they need, how do they handle stress, and what are healthy coping skills. And so we want to make sure that is we're empowering our youth, not only at the high school, but we trickle that down to our middle school and even further to the elementary school levels as well.
I figure we'll just go right around this way. So, hi everyone, I am Jen. I work for Center County Mental Health, which is part of Center County government. I go all throughout the county. So the services that we offer, I'll just give a general in terms of what we offer within Center County. Out of my office, we offer blended case management. Case management services are free. So if individuals are, they don't have insurance that'll cover that, my office will cover that. We also provide funding for additional services. If individuals don't have insurance or their insurance doesn't cover mental health services, you can call our office and just ask for mental health intake and we can walk families through that. And that is for anybody 3 and up. So we can offer those services. In general, outside of family or outside of blended case management, there's intensive behavioral health services, formerly known as wraparound services. That is sort of, you can have a behavioral specialist who will create a behavior plan, a mobile therapist that will then work through that plan with the school districts, with the families, and then they used to call them SS, which they're now called behavioral health techs, will come in and help do those transfer of skills. We also have family-based mental health services, which are a team approach. So you have a master's level mobile therapist that comes out, home, school, community setting. They work a lot with the school districts. In terms of if there's a plan that's happening in the home, they make sure that the school districts are aware of that. There's a case manager that's part of that, so there's a bachelor's level that acts as that blended case manager. And from there, we have inpatient facilities, and we partner a lot with everybody on this panel. As Peter, I'm going to steal Peter's terms here, it does take a village. So when we pull together a team meeting to help support students, I am looking for our non-traditional services, because a lot of insurances only cover your cookie cutter, right? Your individual therapy, family therapies, group therapy, psychiatric, but a lot of folks aren't cookie cutter. And so we have to think outside the box. We partner a lot with Jana Marie. I reach out to Marissa a lot to see what she has going on. We also have another provider in the area, Youth Service Bureau. The Youth Service Bureau, they do a lot of the Parenting Plus. They have youth shelters. They have drop-in centers. We partner a lot with them to see how we can wrap as much services and supports around the student and the family as possible. Part of my role, so I'm the CASP coordinator for Center County. There's only one of me. So when I say I am all throughout the county, every school district, and I have to break our county up into school districts. And when I talk barriers, and I know that's part of this, and I am going to give up the microphone very, very quickly here. Traditionally, across the county, transportation is always one that comes up as a barrier. We really have to think, like, if I'm talking in the Penns Valley area, Bald Eagle, even Bellefonte or Phillipsburg, those conversations are very different. Some of those areas don't have access to any services right there, so there is a travel piece that has to happen. So we try to partner as much as what we can. Had I not had the partnerships that I do, not just with the panel, but with my other human service agencies, it's very difficult to do the jobs that we do. So that open communication is extremely important.
You could talk all night.
I you tell me that all the time.
Thanks. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach and speak just directly from being a school counselor for 34 years in State College School District, and tack on the last couple of years that I've been long-term subbing, so I have about 38 years under my belt. So we have tons of services. That's the answer to that question from my point of view as a school counselor. I spent not 1 minute of one day in all of those years wondering what I would do in the next couple of minutes. I had students constantly in and out of my office. And school counselors have caseloads of about 300 students. That's a pretty big caseload. We are also not mental health therapists. We're not trained to provide mental health or therapy in our offices. We are providing career and scheduling and interpersonal skills and running groups, like for communication or learning how to get along with each other. I mean, we are doing so many other things that mental health, when I began my career, was a very small piece of what I spent my day on. And by the time I retired in 2020 and years later, mental health concerns were taking up an inordinate amount of time and effort, to the point where I would say the things that I was trained to be providing to regular students who are not having a mental health crisis, they were not receiving those services, at least not as best as I think I could have provided those. So, I think we have a tremendous amount, and I'm talking from a school point of view, and we're a school, right? We aren't a mental health institution. We are a school, and so at the end of the day, my job is to help students to figure out what those obstacles are, and maybe that's a mental health concern, or other obstacles, whether it be accessibility, transportation, poverty, those kind of things, and figure out how do we manage that so that at the end of the day, at the end of their career, they walk out with a diploma. They get an education. So that's just kind of a snapshot from a school counselor point of view.
I can't be near a microphone and not speak, but seriously, tonight I think I want to listen more because, you know, speaking to the ways that we in the legislature can influence these things, there's three kind of real big levers that we can pull. One is budget, and, you know, I can talk about some of the things that Governor Shapiro and the legislature, the Department of Human Services, the Department of Health, things that we're working on to try and increase capacity and access for a lot of these great organizations that you're hearing about, you know, establishing grant programs and those kind of things. The second lever we have to pull is around legislation and being able to create programs to, again, work on increasing capacity and access, supporting healthcare workforce, attracting, retaining folks. And then the third is around policy. You know, how do we deploy the limited resources that we have? And, you know, one of the things that I'm particularly interested in, I heard Susan say, you know, a caseload of 300 students. You know, in many parts of the Commonwealth, that would be unbelievably desirable. I mean, you know, the inequity of access. You know, I sit on the education. If you ever heard me talk before, you know I'm going to talk about, you know, the disparities and inequities in funding education and in rural healthcare. You know, quite honestly, we can talk about a lot of those things. You don't have to you don't have to drive very far from State College, and you're in a very, very different world. So, you know, I can talk about some of the things that we're doing. There's quite a lot that relates specifically to mental health, but I would encourage us to think about this in a holistic way because, you know, I knock on doors a lot and I get out in the community and I talk to people. This is not a red or a blue question. This is not an urban or a suburban or a rural issue. You know, the pandemic stress tested everything and, you know, it has just exacerbated the issues that were currently there and just really laid it all bare. So it affects everybody in a bipartisan way. I'm part of the Mental Health Care Caucus, and you know, we have members from both sides because everybody's been touched by it, right? Whether it's in their own families or, you know, friends or in their communities. This is a very pressing issue. And it's funny, I didn't know when I'd be able to say it, but, you know, it's interesting how alliances get built on certain things. I actually saw Senator Mastriano introduced a bill to combat bullying in schools. And it immediately perked up my attention because he and I have worked on some like veterans issues and things, but I'm like, hey, can we include trans kids and non-binary kids in that? So, you know, it's an interesting subject, and it's something that I think there is a lot of room for. So despite what I just said, I talked a lot. I will be listening a fair bit tonight, but I do have some things that I want to share at the appropriate time, but thank you very much for having me.
I am sort of new to the area. I've only been here 2 years. I'm told I can say I'm new for 3, so I'm holding on to that. But I have to say I've just been incredibly impressed with the collaboration and the way that organizations are coming together and the way that there is a village around kids, and I think there has to be when we're under-resourced, right? And so I've been very impressed with that. But I'm the director of the psychological clinic at Penn State. We train PhD clinical psychologists, and we have a child and adolescent track, which is what's most relevant for today. And so, you know, just one example of a collaboration is one that we have with SCADSD, where we're part of this mental health team, and we try to help remove a barrier of transportation by our students who are a lot of the master's level and fully supervised coming in and providing services and support where they can is a great example of that. But we also, provide assessments, things like that, but like many places, we're under-resourced. We have waiting lists and things which make it tougher. And so when we can do this type of a collaboration where it's part of our training mission that fourth-year PhD clinical psych students get to collaborate with the local school system and get in there and provide the evidence-based treatments that they are learning, PCIT, parent management training, really important evidence-based treatments that can help individuals with mental health issues, and all of them involving support of the parents. I think that's really key here, is that this is a family issue, even if it's the child that is sort of the identified person with an issue. So I'm excited, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel, and looking forward to continuing working, collaborating, and finding ways to remove barriers as much as we can. So.
All right, I'm going to skip question 2, and I'm going to combine it with question 3. So, how are schools and community organizations addressing the unique mental health challenges faced by marginalized youth, including LGBTQ students, students of color, those experiencing poverty, and then I'm going to add some stuff from question 2, which is middle school students and other at-risk populations.
All right. So I'm going to keep my answer pretty short on this, but I think we need to meet students with where they're at. I think it does a disservice to say that it has to be done in a cookie cutter approach, because every student and every group of individuals is going to be unique in what their needs are. One of the things that Jana Marie Foundation does is if there is, for example, a death of a student within a district, we can respond and offer some groups during that time. So we work with many different districts in the area, and an example of this is an outside school district. We have been fortunate to work with, well, unfortunate and fortunate, to work with a group of young boys who were considered at risk and also had a close friend die by suicide. And that group is very different than a lot of our groups because of what their needs were at the time. And so we want to make sure that we're listening, we're creating space where they can talk and be open and share what they want to share, and also balance that. So a lot of time, especially if we're talking about grief, like, we're not meant to stay in grief for long periods of time. That's really hard for us to be able to do, especially for our kids. So we'll often see them coming in and out of grief in a variety of different ways. And I think we need to create space and grace for those types of things to happen. And we also need to listen to what they're telling us our needs are. So I think sometimes as adults, we sometimes rush into, we know how to do whatever it is that we're doing, and sometimes we forget about the voices of those who are really important and that we need to be listening to. So sometimes it just starts by listening.
Yeah. One of the mission or goals of our school-based mental health team is to provide access and remove barriers. And so when we talk about students and what their mental health needs is, the great thing about partnering in our community and what we have built in SCASD is that we approach things from multiple different lenses. We have everybody who sits on our team has all different experiences, and what we're looking at specifically is what does that student need and how can we connect them with services. And I really am, being new to the district, it's great to sit on that and to have that collaboration and really think through the supports. A lot of time, new this year, we've pulled in, for our English language learner students, we've pulled in the liaison and saying, what type of services do our students need? How do we connect them to clinicians who are providing services in their own language? We also look quite frequently are we providing
things as a team, and do we maybe need to adjust because our student population's changing, the needs that are coming to us are changing. And so I always said we can't always like wear the same coat. Like sometimes we have to change our coat and we have to change our point of view, and sometimes we have to take a closer look about what the services and programs we're providing and how can we do better, right? So, you know, we've had gaggle therapy, we've moved on to telehealth therapy option for Cartwheel, which actually gives us more access to clinicians who have not only Spanish as their background, but you might have Russian or Ukrainian. So they're, you know, we're working and really expanding like what those services are. Our social work team, who is dynamic and bringing all sorts of ideas, brought in this new program for students who are homeless in our district or unaccompanied youth, and providing free services to mental health clinicians. Like, these are the things that we are going out and seeking, and I'm so grateful for the partnerships and people who sit on this panel who are part of that school-based mental health team, because every conversation is, how do we remove those barriers and really get to what that student needs and provide that access of care? So I like, from our lens, we're always looking at that in that lens.
So beyond just the State College School District too, like, there's student assistance programs in every district. And so every district does try to do different things with their resources that they have. I wish the mental health system had more resources that we could help more of our districts with, because a lot of this, again, as Sue has mentioned, it really is taking the resources from the school districts, right? So if I get involved and we're trying to pull together a meeting, does anybody know the age of consent for mental health services in the Commonwealth? Yeah. What was going on in your lives when you were 14, right? That is that's just a hard one, right? And we have a lot of families sometimes who don't buy into it, right? They've been stressed with things that are going on in the districts, in the community. And so when I get pulled into a meeting, I empower that student, and then I empower the family, right? Because as Marissa said, it is about their voice and meeting them where they're at. If a family isn't vested, if that 14, 15, 16-year-old is, it's their voice. And then we can pull the family in, and we try to do that no matter where the family is. We go to them, we have meetings wherever we can, and it's breaking down even that barrier. Because if you get a family invested, then you can just change that entire family's viewpoint. And that is what I think we are all up here about doing is like Marissa said, we need to meet where they're at. And that age of consent is really hard to explain to some parents sometimes. In my role, I've been called everything but my name, and I'm okay with that because that's my job. I am here to give a voice to a student who this is their first time saying they need the help, and without the partnerships, I couldn't do the job that I do in any of our districts.
I'll just jump on that and say you're right. Every year looks different for what groups we're offering, what kind of groups are gathering, and that changes throughout the school year as well because it depends on the needs of the students. So it looks different from year to year. I think it looks different from semester to semester, depending on if those students' needs are met or whose other needs come to the surface. And those needs are usually expressed to us through all kinds of ways, but like the universal screener that you talked about earlier, or referrals from parents, referrals from the community, referrals from other community resources that are working with those students, teachers, or students themselves. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we become aware of what those needs are. And then once we hear quite a few requests for the same needs, we try to put those students into a group or find a way to match them up with the appropriate services.
Yeah. Hi, Peter Montmany, a clinical psychologist. When I think about meeting the wide range of student and mental health needs, I start very simply with every kid, family, educator I consult with. We're looking at kids, when we're talking about their mental health, we're looking at three main contributions, right? Development, temperament, environment. So we're talking about youth mental health. K to 12, what about the diversity of elementary versus middle school versus high school? Totally different, right? Different temperamental, so we have to understand what's the developmental needs of the child and their family and their teachers. What's the temperamental needs, right? All of our strengths and struggles have some genetic or biological contribution. We have different vulnerabilities. We all have different strengths and struggles, right? So some of it is personal sensitivities and getting dialed into that with that individual, both what their personal strengths and sensitivities may be. And then environment, right? And both the micro caregiving environment and the broader community environment and the environmental factors that are filled with a whole bunch of supports and stressors, right? And differences from financial differences to marginalized groups to people of color and a largely white community. We try to see, meet this child. When we say meet them where they are, I look through the lens of what's their developmental strengths and needs, what's their temperamental strengths and needs, what's their environmental caregiving influences, supports, and stressors. And then we try to move forward to match and meet those as best we can. You've heard tonight, people typically think, my child has some mental health issues or difficulties, I need to find a child counselor or therapist for them. We spoke for 15 minutes, you didn't even hear about an outpatient therapist in the community, right? There are many outpatient therapists in the community. Now, admittedly, a smaller pool of child and adolescent specialists than adult specialists in the community. In addition to that, there are nonprofit agencies such as Jana Marie Foundation, Youth Service Bureau, who are doing primary prevention and early intervention group work and individual work, a wide range you heard. And I have been a member of the State College School District's school-based mental health team since the mid-1990s. It has existed for 30 years in trying to meet the needs, partnering, I'm a community partner with the school district, and in recent years, since COVID and the greater stress and youth crisis, your school district has gone and hired even additional mental health people internally in addition to the external mental health consultants that they've long held to try to, again, meet these needs. And you heard of a wide range of things. Can we meet every need? Can we be perfect? No. But I hope you hear and appreciate the county mental health system that we partner with that provides subsidized services for those who can't afford the private insurance, private pay groups. We do have an array, so we're going to get to talking about access, awareness, education. That's why we're all here tonight, to try to keep coming together to meet those needs better and close those gaps better, one kiddo, one family at a time. So, thank you.
Y'all are going to regret asking me to be here. I've been accused of sometimes being a master of the obvious, but when we're talking about marginalized groups and we're talking about LGBTQ youth and we're talking about at-risk folks, look, I think the title was, how do we approach this in 2025? We have to acknowledge we're in a very different political environment than we were even as recently as November, first week in November. We're in a very, very different world. And I want to keep coming back to the issue of we are blessed in this community with an amazing school board that is incredibly supportive of vulnerable students. We have members of our community who trust organizations and therapists and even online resources. I've got a whole stack of proposed legislation which basically is designed to restrict students' access to support services. Again, there are deserts of support out there. I think it's really important that we recognize that if we're going to be advocates for our kids and our future, we have to humanize what they're going through in a way. We have to speak up for those who are voiceless in this moment And, I try and do that down in Harrisburg. There are folks who are doing it in Washington. It's important that you make your voice heard with legislators and with others, but it's also really important that you speak up to your neighbors, right? To your family. Put a face on some of these things. It's really remarkable to me that sometimes the legislation that comes through or the budget decisions that are made, the calculus changes when it affects somebody in their life, in their world. Sometimes it doesn't, right? Voting against a marriage act, as an example, when you have a child who is in a same-sex marriage, but that's another story. But, we've got a responsibility to stand up for those who cannot stand up themselves, and the absolute best way to do that is to humanize it. So if we're talking about what we do in 2025, we have to recognize that there's this reality, and that there are efforts underway to change the age of consent from 14, to raise it, to minimize access. Let's be glad for what we have, but let's realize that there are some serious headwinds at the moment. So you may regret inviting me, but I just needed to do that reality check.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. You all have touched on this a bit, but I want to give you more time to go more in depth. What systemic barriers prevent youth from accessing mental health support, and what solutions can be implemented?
Always we need to start with mental health with awareness and destigmatization. And I think as a society and as a community more locally, we have come a long, long way in my 35-year career, certainly, and more to go. So we keep doing this, we keep normalizing, and again, I would say State College School District with their student wellness initiatives, including the Mental Health Summit you heard about, and certainly Jana Marie is all about being out on the front edge of that, so I think we always need to start there, and we've made progress, and there's always work to do. I'll put a caveat on that as well. While we want to normalize talking about human emotional challenges, stress and situational challenges, anxiety, I think we also have to be careful about over-pathologizing everything. Anxiety is a normal human emotion. There are individual members, so I talk a lot, I do workshops on mental health differences, difficulties, and disorders. And it's a continuum. So we can get rid of the stigmatizing of, oh, you're crazy and I'm not, or you have that problem and I don't. No, we all have these different problems to varying degrees. And having anxiety doesn't mean necessarily that you're disabled either. So I think we have to work both sides of that. This may or may not be relevant to the question, but I've got the mic, so I'm going for it. All right, so then access, equitable access, certainly finance is a part of that, and you've heard there are systems in place to try to address that, rural versus closer in, even within State College School Districts, sometimes transportation, right, a little bit. And then there is still, there's another challenging thing that was touched on lightly, but there is we're talking both the school district and the community. Child mental health is a family and community issue, of which the school is a subset of the community. That's my worldview take. We can play with it upstairs as you like. I would honestly welcome honest dialogue about that, right? But so when we look at that, what are our community mental health resources and how do we educate and access and facilitate people getting to those first? You can't do good child therapy without working with the parents and the family, right? Children are dependent on parents and teachers, family and schools and communities. So we need to be more holistic and integrative, I think, And there's always challenges when you try to integrate systems. Homeschool communications can get botched up. People can have fear on both sides of that. Honest differences, honest misunderstandings. We need to constantly be vigilant and good-willed to meet each other, to create that mindful village, if you will, to take care of our kids with a little bit more wisdom and compassion. And I better stop there. Thank you.
I was just going to chime in it is a partnership. And I think we've really looked at that this year, is that how can we provide more resources to families? Because I'm a parent of a teen, and there are some days that we just are on the struggle bus at home. I mean, we could be happy one minute and sad the other minute, and it's just like, who is this person that was dropped on my doorstep? But one of the things that, we've partnered, like Jana Marie, we partnered, is how can we create educational programming that meets the parents' needs? How can we have conversations? Digital literacy. Oh my goodness. I don't know all the text messages, the apps, and all those things. I probably look at like a PI sometimes at home, because I literally go through my child's cell phone and going, what's this? What's this? And she's like, oh my gosh, Mom, please stop, saying this. But it's those kind of conversations that we have to have. How can we educate? How can we talk about apps? How we can talk about like that digital wellness, because a lot of that is contributed. We don't think about that cell phone and that device as a source of trauma. It is. They are like those shorts, those TikTok videos and things like that, the things we're seeing. The conversations. How do you have a conversation with students? They hear everything. They hear our conversations. They're watching the news. There's things going on at school that are being introduced to them. So really that educational piece and things that we're going to look forward to even for next year is how can we just provide some more resources to families. Our Mindfulness Connection newsletters that come out monthly always has lists of resources. We've also internally created one of our mental health clinicians works with all of our providers in the area and keeps a running list of who's open, who has access, what kind of insurances that they have open, and that has been a tremendous help, because sometimes you're like, hey, I have insurance, I just need to connect it, who can I go for, like what are their things? And we have a running list. We keep those resources available just to provide more resources to families. So I think that partnership has to kind of be, it's a communication dialogue. How do we keep open communications? How do we provide and partner to provide more educational pieces to families? Because your involvement is very important. And I know you'll probably touch base on this too, so.
Yeah, so I can echo a lot of what Dr. Montminy and Stephanie have said here as well. And there are barriers that are out there, but there's a lot of work being done to limit those gaps in services. And so I think we often think about those traditional methods of help, which are really important. So I have a kiddo that struggles too, and I know the frustration of those long wait lists and everything. And those one-on-one counseling services can be really beneficial for a lot of individuals. And there's a lot of other programs that are out there too that we can use. So building resiliency is really important. I'm a youth resilience coach. I've done a lot of trainings in resiliency, and I cannot speak enough about how important those types of skills are, not only for our youth, but also for us as adults. So our kids are watching everything that we're doing, and if we're having a hard time bouncing back or forward from those things that we're experiencing, they're going to see that and also start to have some of those same struggles. And so we really want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we can model those good behaviors and not only just educate about it, but also live it for our own self. And so I think that resilience piece is really important. I think education is really important. So making sure that we know what those apps are, and that we're sharing what our own values are around them. So we can set up all the roles and things around our kids using these devices, and they're still going to make decisions on their own when we're not right there with them. And so we need to also not just say, hey, you cannot use this app. We need to share why. What value is it? We don't need long explanations. That doesn't matter, but they need to understand the values behind it, especially when they get more into that middle school, high school years, so that they can make really good, healthy choices for their life that are in line with the values and the guide rails that we've put in place. I will also just mention that sometimes that transportation is a barrier. Sometimes Wi-Fi is. So like while we can do education online to try to take away the transportation barrier, we also know that Wi-Fi is not great in a lot of our different areas, especially in our more rural communities. So we're working to create a mobile vehicle that can go out and have a lot of programs around resiliency, bring the education right to parents and caregivers into communities. I know YSB, Youth Service Bureau, also has a vehicle that they can go out and do similar things. So there's a lot of partners and agencies working together to figure out how do we meet, get more into these communities and eliminate those different barriers that are there for mental health. And the other thing too is that sometimes we just need to think about self-care. So looking at how do we get into groups with like-minded people. So that doesn't solve all of our youth problems, but if they have interest in theater or in sports or in drawing, trying to get them into some of those groups, because it will keep building those support systems for them, and also give them an outlet to express themselves in a way that is healthy and helpful for them. So I think we can also tap into those extracurriculars and things like that to really help us with limiting some of those different barriers.
Okay, might as well. We're talking about reducing barriers. Again, back to what levers do we at the state level have to pull? And we often have to work through organizations, schools, you see kids all the time. So, trying to fund programs and try and make grant dollars available. For example, we put about $100 million into school safety grants. For some districts, that means, locking doors and metal detectors. For others, it means violence prevention issues. For some, it means, programs around identifying kids at risk. Reducing barriers, I think of it as also increasing access. We don't have enough expertise. We don't have a workforce that we need to do the work that needs to be done. So how do we incentivize school counselors and psychologists, and how do we expand practice for nurse practitioners, or how do we expand access for telehealth, and how do we make those things available where frankly there are deserts out there. So we're looking at things like incentive programs, loan forgiveness programs, ways to try and build the capacity that we currently lack in large parts of the Commonwealth. And the one thing so that's sort of workforce, but the third thing, and we sort of talked about it a little bit, but it's building infrastructure. And what I mean by that is the 988 system, which is huge. We're putting millions of dollars into expanding that program. It used to be you dialed 911 and you got what you got, very often the police or emergency services. You didn't get somebody who was trained in a crisis mental health situation. We have that now. The 988 system, we're continuing to invest in it. There's about 10,000 calls per month into the Pennsylvania hotlines. About 90% of them are now actually answered by people within Pennsylvania. So, the center safes and folks who have training. And the whole idea is around developing a continuum of care. So in other words, you get that initial call and you can help diffuse, you can help address the immediate crisis, because very often, you know, suicide and self-harm is an impulsive act. So just having the ability to intervene is really profoundly important. But we're also developing mobile crisis centers so that people can go out and help people who are in dire need. And now, having walk-in crisis centers, we're beginning to develop that kind of a capacity so that, you know, short-term stabilization, assessment, and then be able to get them into a facility, which we don't have nearly enough of, you know, inpatient, you know, crisis. So it's this challenge that we have across the board that we're trying to invest in. And by the way, speaking of reducing barriers, the fastest growing segment of that 988 is texting. We have to meet students where they're at. I mean, there's already 5,000 texts a month. It's grown 200% in the last year. I mean, you know, I know kids, I've spoken to kids who actually do therapy through text. You know, it reduces the barriers. They don't want to talk to somebody, but they're very comfortable texting people. So, you know, I think we have to look at this in a comprehensive way, and I will shut up, but these are all things that if you support, let your legislators know, because I came from an appropriations hearing today. It was a day-long thing where we're talking about how do we fund these things? How do we fund workforce? How do we fund, you know, infrastructure? How do we invest in this continuum of care? We need to hear you tell us that this is a priority for you, because we are working on those things.
And I'll just say one quick thing too, like 988 was an amazing addition to our mental health system as we have it. And we have an amazing partnership with our local crisis. So Center for Community Resources does offer that. You know, you can go out and do a mobile, you can, you know, have them come into the school districts without having that component in addition to the 988. And I mean, do we need more? Absolutely. I would love to see more money put into like the walk-in crisis centers. And I'm sure if Crisis was sitting here, they would say, yes, we would love to hire more staff. We would love to have the way to expand that and maybe even have like mobile sites within our more rural communities, because I think that's a hard part sometimes, because if they're located in State College and they have to go out to Madisonburg or they have to go out on the other side of Osceola, that's an hour drive. And if that person is coming from their home, that could be an additional kind of time on there. So I love the fact that we are going to have more money put into some of our mobile crisis, because I think that that's a huge, huge component that we're missing. Because even when 988 would link to local crisis, it's like, where do we then go from there if staff isn't available to then respond to that?
Can I add one more thing? I'm sorry, one more thing. You know, one of the things, you know, I just talked about all the state investments. There's a huge uncertainty about what's going to happen with federal dollars, billions and billions of dollars. I mean, the total budget, you know, for behavioral and mental health care services, substance abuse, in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is around $1 billion, right? The total budget's like 64, but more than half of that comes from the federal side. It's pass through, it's Medicaid money. There are plans afoot to slash that. That will cripple our rural healthcare system. It will leave vulnerable people. There's estimates that it could result in a $2 trillion reduction in funding. 30 million people who now have healthcare being, you know, forced off of it, depending on which states, you know, continue to provide these. This is a crisis, folks. And when I say make yourself heard at the federal level too. Call and tell them that we need to continue to invest in all healthcare, rural, urban, suburban, and definitely mental health care, because we're at an inflection point. You know, if those federal dollars don't show up, we don't have the money to send to the county. We don't have the money to send to the schools. We're just going to be plugging holes, and there's just going to be far too many of them. So, sorry to be a downer, but it's in our hands to make sure that we have our voices heard.
I teach a lot of kids emotional regulation, self-regulation skills. Now, bear with me. And I always start, the first step is we need self-awareness and self-acceptance before we can get to self-regulation and making smart, healthy choices. We need the awareness of the reality of this, and we need to come together to speak up and act on it to the degree that we care, and we're all in this room, we care.
All right, this is going to be our last question up here, but we will continue our discussion with the panelists upstairs. So, what steps can families, educators, and community leaders take to promote mental well-being and reduce stigma around mental health support for youth? We've touched on it a little bit, but love to hear you all expand.
All right, just one step I would say is that you can take a course. So Jana Marie Foundation offers a ton of different no-cost trainings that you can come to and learn more about mental health, learn more about the available resources here in our community as well as nationwide, and learn how to engage in these courageous conversations. Part of that education is also how do we break down those barriers that have historically prevented people from reaching out for help or to help someone. And so those courses could be question, persuade, refer, suicide prevention training, counseling on access to lethal means. So how do we create those safe environments within our homes? Mental health first aid, it's a longer commitment, it's a day commitment, but tons of really great information in there. Compassion resilience, so how do we take care of ourselves so we can show up better for other people? Tuning into teens, that's gonna be like an 8-week series, but how do we have conversations with our teens so that they'll listen to us and that we can listen and hear what it is that they are saying? So all of those courses can be really helpful and beneficial to someone and can help us reduce stigma. So it's a tangible action step that you can take, and then also supporting the work of the individuals that are doing it. So you talk about federal funding, and that impacts us too. So about a third of our budget comes from that. We don't get funding. All of our programs are no cost to the participants, and we don't get funding from a lot of our schools and things like that. And so it takes an entire village, I'm gonna steal it again, in order to do the work. And so really supporting those organizations that you're passionate about, whatever organization it is really crucial right now.
I don't know why they give me a microphone. I could do the same thing and just sit up here and talk, but I think, again, I use my voice. I advocate for what I hear is needed within our school districts, within our communities. And yeah, we could sit up here and say funding, and we could say transportation, but it's your voice. It is the voice of the youth in our community. I think we need to start empowering our youth. It doesn't matter the age. A kindergartner can say what they're gonna need or they're gonna want and what they're gonna need to be successful. If you look around our community, you see stompers, right? If anybody's ever had the opportunity, I can't look at Marissa or I'm gonna cry, but we had the opportunity with a grant to create a stomper for our office. And we were able to go into the schools, we were able to go into our senior centers, we were able to go into our jail, we were able to go all over the county. And when they were painting a sneaker, the stories they shared, that right there broke down a barrier. And I had the opportunity to name ours, and I named it Voice for that reason alone, because every sneaker piece that is on there is someone's voice and someone's story. And that is extremely powerful. And that is what we need. It needs to start with our youth, but it needs to work up through all the family systems and throughout education, and then work its way up to the federal government to say, listen, this is what we need.
I'll just take a minute. I want to jump on Peter's point of, really intentionally thinking about your language, how we talk to young people about mental health. I think we're pretty saturated in our culture in the mental health movement, and so I think sometimes we send a message that if you're not happy all the time, there's something wrong with you. And I think we have to be very careful about the language that we use and use words like management, right? How do you manage these feelings? How do you manage what's happening to you? Because it is manageable. There is hope for kids who have depression and anxiety. It's not something that will ruin or end their life, nor does it mean we stop having expectations from them. So really having intentional conversations and using words that describe what's happening. I liked your message with just the word stress. I coached cross country for 20-some years, and there was a series of years where the girls stopped talking about being scared on the start line and started talking about being anxious and having anxiety. And we started hearing that and really tried to move them out of, no, you're scared. And how can you use that? How do you use nervous tension to get you off of a start line and into a race where you have to be quick? It's a useful feeling. But we had to educate them about that. So, intentional conversation.
One of the things that we talked recently about in school-based mental health is this power of yet. And there's lots of articles about it. And sometimes we think sometimes we look at things through labels and deficits. And it's not that anything's wrong. We need to say, hey, maybe I haven't learned that skill yet. Maybe I don't know how to advocate for myself yet. But how can we give that youth resources and supports to really advocate for themselves and to listen? Sometimes we're not listening. And so how do we actively listen and engage and think through what those supports are needed? And that comes from not even our youth. You know, one of the great things about our high school is that we do have a Mental Health Matters Club, and our youth have really taken ownership for our Mental Health Summit and to work through with Jana Marie and other providers to really kind of recognize student wellness. But how do we expand on that, and how do we really connect those things? And part of that is also hearing your voice too. What is it, the resources and the things that you need from us as family? What educational pieces? What are things you haven't learned yet? And how can we provide and partner with you on that? And so I really we've really talked about that and have good conversations about that, because it's not that we're looking at it saying that there's something wrong with you, but we can support you. And so how do we get to that next step?
Real quick, I promise this time. I feel a little self-conscious sitting up here with all the experts about what I'm about to say, but I think it's really important, particularly given some of the realities that I've talked about. There's a lot of stress out there. There's a lot of uncertainty. It hits me almost every single day. It hits my family. It hits everybody. Like on the plane where they say, secure your mask first. Take care of yourselves too. Think about, you can only help someone else if you are taking care of yourself. Be on the lookout for others. Be gentle with yourself. It's a very, very hard time for everybody. But we're in this together, and don't forget that. There's a lot of people here who care.
I think what I'm hearing from everybody, which is so important, is this idea of conversations and how we're talking about these things, both parents to kids. I think with social media and all the other distractions and everything going on in the world, we forget how powerful that connection is, whether it's a parent to a child, whether it's parents to each other, whether it's kids to each other. We have some groups, for example, at our clinic that are safe spaces where kids can together in a therapeutic, safe environment really just talk about what they need to and support each other. So doing all of that, but the education piece as well, I think if the community has a certain language and a message that we're all spreading, that it's tough right now, we're in this together, and together we're going to work through it in this way, that way, however we come up with. But I think the conversations, the communication, the words that we use, both not pathologizing, but also being supportive and understanding and educating about what those differences are so people know when to try to connect, that's the key. But I have hope because I look at a person, your representative, you're here, this is so important to you, you're here, right? I look at everybody on this, I'm just meeting you, but some of you I've been working with, and the hope is that all of these things, being able to educate and destigmatize and debunk myths about mental health, the people here, that's what we have been trained to do. Now's our time. Maybe we're tired, but we can't be right now, right? And when we work with families, when we partner together and we feel so much stronger. So for everybody that's here, thank you for coming, because obviously this is important to you as well, and I hope that we hear from you upstairs and even afterwards about ways that we can help fill some of these gaps that we've all talked about that are in the way. But we've got so much incredible expertise, and we're in the town of a university that's constantly doing research and working on ways to overcome a lot of this, so we're lucky in that way too.
I think the key, beautiful, thank you, Teresa, everyone. I think the key is humanize, not overly personalize. Humanize, not personalize. That doesn't mean not give personal attention. It means I'm not broken. It means it is universal to experience difficult emotions. It is universal to experience stress and challenge. And let's put an emphasis on mental health, which is about meeting the stressors and demands of our lives with resilience. Right? Everyone, again, has strengths and struggles. It's human. It's not wrong with me. So let's join together and be intentional with our conversations and our words, and frame it that way for all of us. I have strengths and struggles in terms of my skills. I have strengths and stressors in terms of my supports around me. Let me keep being aware that it's both internal responsibility and community responsibility, and keep working to grow that. That's my hope.
All right, thank you all. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists. I want to thank all of you for your time and attention on this important topic tonight. We're going to take a moment to do what your body needs. We have some drinks up out front, and then we'll meet upstairs. Before we do that, I want to give a special shout out to some of the people that made today's programming happen. A couple of the teams at the borough. So we have our communications team, which it consists of Kayla and Jesse, thanking them. Our community engagement team, which consists of Elton and Lydia, thank you. Our DEIB team, which is myself and Genevieve. And then as well as Tom Fontaine, our borough manager, and our chief of police, John Gardner. We want to thank all of them for supporting this series and making it happy and happen. Whoa. And thanks to the State Theater for hosting the event, and to CNET for live streaming the event for us. The recording will be available on the borough's engagement page if you go to Community Conversations. Once that becomes available to us, we'll put it on there. So please feel free to share it with anyone who wasn't able to tune in today. Thanks.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
Center Region Parks and Recreation manages 56 municipal and regional parks. These beautiful parks offer amenities such as sports fields, rentable picnic pavilions, playgrounds, bike and walking trails, and recreation facilities. Take some time to find your park and spend some time outdoors. Visit crpr.org for a list of park locations and amenities.